A quiet tension has moved through the NASCAR garage following the Cup Series stop at COTA, and it is centered on one question that keeps resurfacing across teams, media, and fans: is the competitive balance holding, or is an unseen advantage shaping the results? The background to that question is the most defining performance of the season so far, because Tyler Reddick has opened the year with 3 straight victories, and those wins have come in 3 very different racing environments. At the same time, the conversation around speed has collided with a major off-track dispute involving 2311 racing and NASCAR, creating a situation where every result is being interpreted through both performance and politics. Alongside those storylines, the week has also produced direct competitive consequences, because the driver market has shifted heading into Phoenix Raceway, and those lineup decisions affect multiple organizations. The uneasy feeling in the NASCAR garage. Is the competition level, or is something else at play? That question has stayed active because the early part of the schedule has not produced a rotating list of winners. Instead, it has produced a single organization and a single driver placing consistent control over race outcomes. The dominance, highlighting Tyler Reddick's historic three-peat: Daytona, Atlanta, COTA. 3 consecutive wins to start a season is rare in the modern Cup Series, and the variety of tracks makes it harder to dismiss as a one-track strength. The conflict, the intersection of on-track success and off-track legal battles, 2311 versus NASCAR. With a lawsuit in the background, that run of results has become more than a performance story. The fallout, brief mention of the driver market shakeup for Phoenix. Phoenix now arrives with teams making emergency and strategic driver decisions that could change who contends for points and stage results. One of the most immediate changes involves Hendrick Motorsports and the health of Alex Bowman. The Bowman bombshell: Alex Bowman's diagnosis of vertigo following the brutal COTA race. After the event at Circuit of the Americas, Bowman's condition was described as vertigo, and that diagnosis directly affects whether a driver can safely compete at Cup speeds. The decision that followed was not treated as routine, because Phoenix is not a low-risk environment. It is a 1-mile track that demands repeated high-load corner entries, constant steering input, and heavy braking points that punish even minor disorientation. That context is why the team moved quickly to set a substitute plan rather than attempt a wait-and-see approach. The replacement, Anthony Alfredo, gets the call-up to drive the number 48 for Hendrick Motorsports. For Alfredo, the assignment represents a major Cup opportunity in one of the series' premier organizations, and it places him in a car that typically operates with expectations of competing for top positions and collecting points in every stage. The substitution also creates logistical consequences, because every driver change requires adjustments to seat fitting, communication styles with a crew chief, pit entry habits, and restart decision-making. Teams can simulate some of that, but race traffic forces real-time choices that come only with reps. Phoenix has a reputation for producing restarts where track position matters, and it routinely becomes a race where execution on pit road and the timing of short runs can decide large chunks of the finishing order. At Childress Racing, another driver decision has been confirmed, and it is more strategic than medical. RCR's strategy, the rotation of the number 33 Chevrolet and what it means for Childress Racing's depth chart. A rotation in the know. 33 signals that RCR is using that entry to evaluate options, manage sponsorship requirements, and keep multiple drivers race-ready. Rotations also affect how a team builds continuity because the feedback loop between driver and engineers changes from week to week. That matters at Phoenix because it is one of the most setup-sensitive tracks on the schedule, where long-run balance can swing based on tiny changes to brake bias, rear skew behavior, and how quickly the tires fall off. A stable driver lineup often helps in those environments, so a rotation becomes a variable that can either unlock performance with fresh input or create inconsistency in direction. While those driver changes are significant, the performance story that continues to control the weekly news cycle is still the 3-race run by Reddick and 2311 Racing. 3 of the Reddick Rampage, a statistical anomaly? That question is being asked because the wins have not come from a single racing pattern, and they have required 3 different approaches to traffic, tire strategy, and late race execution. Breaking down the wins: how Reddick won on a superspeedway, Daytona, a rough-and-tumble intermediate, Atlanta, and a road course, COTA. On a superspeedway like Daytona, results depend on drafting partners, lane choice, and avoiding multi-car incidents that can erase a strong car in seconds. At Atlanta, the surface and racing style have produced packs and contact-heavy sequences where drivers must manage both aggression and survival while still positioning for the final run. At COTA, the track demands braking discipline, corner exit consistency, and the ability to avoid penalties or mistakes that can destroy track position. Winning those 3 in a row means the team has executed across the most different set of skill requirements the series can offer in a 3-week span. The points gap, the massive lead 23-11, has already built over the field. The standings impact is not limited to the wins themselves, because points accumulation early creates flexibility later with strategy calls, risk tolerance, and playoff position security. When a team starts building separation this early, it changes how other organizations approach the next races, because they are forced to pursue wins or stage points more aggressively to keep pace. That can lead to teams taking 2-tire calls, stretching fuel windows, or pitting off sequence to gain clean air, which increases the likelihood of mistakes. A strong points cushion also changes internal planning, because it allows a team to test race setups with longer-term goals rather than running purely conservative packages to protect weekly finishes. The story becomes even more significant because the success is not confined to one car. Bubba Wallace, the silent assassin, sitting P2 in points, solidifying 23-11 as a powerhouse. A second driver high in the standings provides evidence that the performance is organizational rather than a single driver surge. When both cars are consistently scoring, it suggests that simulation work, engineering direction, pit crew execution, and overall program decisions are producing repeatable performance. In Cup racing, that matters because one fast car can be an outlier. 2 cars near the top of the standings points toward a system that is working across personnel groups. That is where the discussion turns from performance to suspicion, because the current environment includes an active legal dispute that has kept attention on NASCAR governance and business structure. For the elephant in the room, conspiracy theories. The speed is measurable and the results are official, but the interpretation has changed because the team's off-track posture has been confrontational through legal action. The lawsuit context: recap of the 23-11 Racing and Front Row Motorsports lawsuit against NASCAR regarding the charter agreement. The lawsuit has centered on the charter system and related business terms, and it has involved 23-11 Racing and Front Row Motorsports in a direct dispute with NASCAR. That backdrop has created an incentive for online speculation, because fans often link governance conflict to competitive outcomes even when technical evidence is not presented. Fan speculation: why fans think NASCAR is allowing 23-11 to win to mitigate bad PR or manipulate the narrative. The claim in circulation is that NASCAR, facing public scrutiny because of litigation, would benefit from the optics of a successful 23-11 program, and therefore would treat the team differently in enforcement. This is not a technical allegation supported by a public rule violation. It is a narrative explanation that spreads because the start to the season has been so dominant and because the lawsuit gives the situation a political storyline. It is also fueled by the fact that modern NASCAR competition is tight, and even small advantages can decide races, especially when a team is already executing at a high level. The tech inspection reality: what NASCAR officials actually found, or didn't find, post-race at COTA. Debunking the myths versus the reality of engineering excellence. Post-race inspection procedures exist to confirm compliance, and the key point driving the current debate is that the results of inspection have not produced a public disqualification tied to the COTA win. Without an announced penalty, the official outcome remains unchanged, and that limits what can be stated as fact beyond the absence of an enforcement action that removes the win. In NASCAR's current inspection environment, teams also operate under strict part supply rules and standardized components for the next-gen platform, which shifts competitive advantage toward how organizations optimize setups, simulation, pit calls, and execution rather than relying on major illegal modifications. That does not eliminate rule-breaking historically, but it does narrow the range of what can be altered compared to previous eras, which is part of why the conversation increasingly points toward engineering and operational excellence as the most likely explanation when no violation is announced. The implications now stretch beyond one weekend, because a team that begins the season with this type of control can influence how the entire year is raced. Implications for the 2026 season. NASCAR seasons are shaped by momentum, and early domination can force competitors to spend the next months chasing performance direction rather than refining a stable baseline. A changing of the guard. Are we seeing the decline of the Big Three, Hendrick, Gibbs, Penske, in favor of a new super team? The question exists because the sport has historically been led by power organizations, and Hendrick Motorsports, Joe Gibbs Racing, and Team Penske have each defined multi-year stretches. A surge by 23XI Racing that includes wins and top standings positions for multiple cars introduces the possibility that the competitive hierarchy is shifting. Whether that becomes reality depends on sustainability across intermediate tracks, short tracks, and the summer stretch where heat and tire falloff can expose weaknesses. However, the current results are enough to keep the topic active week to week. The next data point arrives immediately at Phoenix, and it includes both the competitive momentum of 23XI and the disruption affecting other teams. Phoenix preview: how the driver changes and the momentum shift will affect the upcoming race at Phoenix Raceway. Substitute drivers and rotations can change how teams qualify, how they handle long-run balance, and how aggressively they pursue stage points. Phoenix also places high importance on restarts and late race execution, because the preferred groove can change with rubber buildup and the final green flag run often becomes a battle for clean air. For Anthony Alfredo in the number 48, the weekend becomes a test of adaptation under pressure. For RCR's rotated entry, it becomes a test of whether the organization can keep performance stable despite changes in driver feedback. For 23XI, Phoenix is a test of whether the current advantage travels to a track type that many teams treat as a benchmark for handling and braking performance. 6. Conclusion: in this case is not a wrap-up segment but a clear accounting of what is now shaping the competitive landscape, because the season's central storylines have already formed. Summary: recap of the three major storylines: Reddick's wins, the conspiracies, and the driver swaps. The results show Tyler Reddick has won Daytona, Atlanta, and COTA to start the year. The online response has produced conspiracy narratives tied to the 23XI Racing legal fight with NASCAR, and the competitive field is heading to Phoenix with real driver changes, including Alex Bowman's vertigo diagnosis and Anthony Alfredo stepping into the number 48, plus RCR's number 33 rotation. Call to action: encouraging viewers to like, subscribe, and share their theories in the comments. If you want continued coverage of Phoenix updates, inspection outcomes, and confirmed driver lineups as they happen, subscribe to the channel, click like, and share your read on the 23XI situation and the Phoenix driver changes in the comments.